You've probably canceled a trip because of a little rain. Maybe you turned around when the wind picked up, or stayed home because the forecast looked iffy. That instinct feels like common sense. But there was a man who looked at 800 miles of the most violent ocean on Earth, in a boat the length of a school bus, and decided that was the safer option. The real answer to how he survived is far stranger than courage. It is a story about what the human mind does when hope becomes a tool instead of a feeling. His name was Ernest Shackleton. In 1914 he set out to cross Antarctica on foot, something no one had ever done. He never got the chance. His ship, the Endurance, got trapped in pack ice, crushed slowly over 10 months, and finally sank into the Weddell Sea. 28 men were now stranded on the ice, thousands of miles from anyone who knew they were missing. There were no satellites, no radio signal reaching the outside world. If they were going to live, they had to save themselves. Why does a crisis like this often reveal calm instead of panic? Psychologists who study extreme environments, like Peter Sudfeld at the University of British Columbia, have spent decades studying people in polar isolation, and one pattern shows up again and again. Groups under prolonged, survivable stress often don't fall apart. They organize. Roles sharpen. Someone becomes the planner. Someone becomes the mood. Someone becomes the workhorse. Shackleton, without knowing the psychology behind it, built exactly this kind of structure. He kept men busy. He kept routines. He shared his own tent with the 2 crew members he trusted least, because idle resentment is more dangerous on the ice than the ice itself. 4 months, the men drifted on ice floes, watching their world shrink beneath them. Eventually the ice broke apart completely, and there was only one option left. 3 small lifeboats, saved from the sinking ship, would carry them to the nearest scrap of land. Elephant Island. Uninhabited. Barren. But solid. They reached it. And then Shackleton understood the truth no one wanted to say out loud. No ship would ever find them there. Elephant Island wasn't on any shipping route. Waiting meant dying slowly together in a place with no wood, no game, and no rescue. So he made a decision that still stuns historians today. He would take the smallest of the 3 boats, the James Caird, 22 feet long, and sail it across the most dangerous stretch of open water on the planet. His destination was South Georgia Island, a whaling outpost 800 nautical miles away. 800 miles through the Southern Ocean in winter, in a wooden boat with no engine, no radio, and only a sextant to guide them. He picked 5 men to go with him. Frank Worsley, the ship's captain, whose navigation skill was about to become the only thing standing between them and oblivion. Tom Crean, a hardened Irish sailor who had already survived 2 previous polar expeditions. Timothy McCarthy, John Vincent, and Harry McNish, the ship's carpenter, whose hands would matter as much as anyone's compass. McNish had one job before they left, and it might be the most overlooked act of engineering in survival history. He raised the sides of the Caird, sealed the seams with oil paint and seal blood, and built a makeshift deck out of sledge runners and canvas, using tools that were never meant for this. Why does a small, unglamorous act like this deserve more credit than the sailing itself? Because without it, the boat would have swamped in the first storm. Preparation is invisible until the moment it saves your life. They launched on April 24, 1916. 22 men stayed behind on Elephant Island, watching 6 of their friends sail into water that regularly produces 60-foot waves. The Southern Ocean has no land masses to break its storms. Wind circles the entire planet uninterrupted, building waves that modern sailors still respect with genuine fear. Inside the Caird there was no dry space. Sleeping bags froze solid. Spray turned to ice on contact with skin and clothing, adding weight the boat could barely spare. Worsley took sextant readings whenever the sky cleared enough to see the sun, sometimes for only seconds at a time, and used those glimpses to calculate their position across an empty stretch of ocean with no landmarks at all. One mistake of even a few degrees would have sent them past South Georgia entirely, into thousands of miles of open sea with no next chance. Have you ever wondered how someone keeps making precise decisions while their body is falling apart around them? Cold water physiology research, going back to studies from the Second World War on immersion and survival, shows that extreme cold narrows attention. The brain starts prioritizing ruthlessly. Non-essential thoughts fade. Only the task in front of you remains. In a strange way, the ocean was stripping away everything except the exact skill needed to survive it. For 17 days they fought the sea. Waves broke over the boat constantly. At one point, Shackleton later wrote that he saw what he thought was a break in the clouds, only to realize it was the crest of a wave taller than the boat itself, about to crash down on them. It didn't sink them. Barely. Then on May 8 they saw land. South Georgia, jagged and glacier-covered, rose out of the mist. But the story wasn't finished. A hurricane forced them to hold offshore for another full day, close enough to see land and unable to reach it. Watching the very thing that could save them threatened to kill them instead. They finally landed on the wrong side of the island. The whaling stations, the only outposts of human contact, sat on the other side, across mountains no one had ever crossed. So 3 of them, Shackleton, Worsley, and Crean, left the other men to recover and climbed. 36 hours, no map, over terrain explorers still considered dangerous today with modern gear. They crossed glaciers, ridgelines, and a frozen waterfall they descended by sliding down blind, hoping there was solid ground at the bottom. There was. They reached the whaling station at Stromness on May 20th. The men who greeted them didn't recognize them at first. Their skin was blackened by frostbite and months of exposure. Their beards were matted with salt. One of the station managers who had known Shackleton before the expedition reportedly had to be told who was standing in front of him. What happened next tells you more about the man than the journey did. Shackleton didn't rest. He organized a rescue for the men on the far side of South Georgia first, then turned his attention back to Elephant Island, where 22 men were still waiting, surviving on seal meat and hope under an overturned lifeboat. It took 4 attempts, blocked repeatedly by pack ice, before a ship finally broke through in August of 1916. Every single man who left on the Endurance was still alive. Every single one. 28 men, nearly 2 years stranded, one of the most violent oceans on the planet crossed in an open boat, and not one life lost. Modern expedition psychologists still study this outcome because statistically, it shouldn't have happened. Prolonged isolation combined with genuine physical danger tends to erode group cohesion over time. Something about the way Shackleton led kept that erosion from happening. Researchers studying leadership under existential threat, including work built on Irving Janis's studies of group decision-making, point to one recurring factor in outcomes like this. Leaders who survive these situations well tend to protect morale as aggressively as they protect physical safety. Shackleton rationed food carefully, yes, but he also rationed despair. He controlled what information reached the men and when, not to deceive them, but to prevent panic from becoming its own kind of storm. Here's the part that should sit with you a little longer than the rest. Shackleton failed at his original goal. He never crossed Antarctica. The expedition, by its own stated purpose, was a failure. And yet his name is remembered more than almost any explorer who succeeded at what they set out to do. Why does a failure become one of history's most studied examples of leadership? Maybe because the goal was never really the continent. The goal, once the ice closed in, became something smaller and far more human. Get everyone home. Every decision after that point, the boats, the boy who painted the seams, the 6 men in the Caird, the climb across an unmapped island, existed in service of that single narrowed purpose. You will probably never face 6-story waves in an open boat, but you've likely faced a version of this same test, a plan that collapsed completely, a goal that became impossible the moment you were closest to it. The question Shackleton's story leaves you with isn't whether you can control the storm. You can't. It's what you decide the new goal becomes once the old one is gone. Tonight, when something in your life doesn't go the way you planned, you might flip a switch and move on without thinking twice about it. But somewhere in the back of your mind, you now know that the real answer to survival was never about the plan surviving. It was about deciding what still mattered once it didn't.